social contract between the government and the governed, and that you govern by the consent of the people. And therefore, we institute the institution of election, periodic election, for a vote of confidence. Where confidence fails, people and the law have suggested that revolution is justified. If you breach the social contract, revolution is justified. Modalities of governance. Lack of consensus, in my view, has generated continuing debate centered mainly on either strong leadership, strong institution, or both. No consensus. Strong leadership, which chairman says we need. Strong institution can take care of even the excesses of the individual, which also we need. But some people say we need both. So the debate continues. Some countries or bloc of countries engage in ideological warfare and armed convention to force the adoption of certain socio-political systems. This is all because of lack of consensus on the modality of governance. This characterized the Cold War period, which ended around 1990, but which I still believe is continuing in the international scene. You only need to look at the trouble spots in the world to know that those combatants during the Cold War had a truce, but it was not a genuine truce. They are still fighting each other. Leadership, global security, and sovereignty. I look at the United Nations leadership. United Nations, as you know, United Nations was a successor to the League of Nations. But the politicking going on there, to my mind, is ambivalent. It's not straightforward. You don't have a strong leadership at all. And this is impacting on the security of many countries. Permanent members, there are 5. They are the core group. It's a club. It's a privileged club. Since 1945, or immediately after 1945, when the United Nations was established, they have not allowed any other country to break their rank. For how long we'll continue with that situation, I don't know. But United Nations, members of the Security Council, they have refused to democratize, even though some countries have improved since that time. Ambivalent nature, I said, is that they over-scrutinize affairs of smaller countries. But the bigger countries, the bigger powers, they commit equally strong crime. And yet, nobody sanctions them. If you are a small power, God help you. Because as soon as you start to raise your head, they will clap you down. And you can look at the countries which are suffering today, who are accused of committing certain crime, and yet the powerful countries are committing even worse, and they get away with it. You need only to look at how elections and national census is conducted in every country. Nigeria cannot say it will conduct its own population census or its election without interference with anybody. They will come. In fact, they will contribute money to say hold census or hold the election. What is their interest, you ask? Motives of some countries, as I said, some of what they give you as assistance is a Greek gift. What is a Greek gift? Greek gift means it's something which has some strings attached. Loans and debt burden, cause of social upheavals. Countries of great potential are targeted for destabilization and destruction. You only look around the world and see that any country of great potential which would challenge their privileged position will be clamped down by one kind of insinuation or the other, whether you are preaching human rights or treating your citizens, which they say, against humanitarian considerations. The big powers jealously protect their privileged positions, hegemony, and spheres of influence. You see, some European countries are sending their troops to African countries. What is their interest? It is nothing other than to protect their hegemony, that is, their privileged position, and spheres of influence which originated from colonial period. Up till now, none of them has given up. Even some of the advanced countries who had no colony before are still trying to create spheres of influence. In terms of people who assist you with ulterior motive, I want you, if you have access to a book called Confessions of Economic Hitman, Perkins, John Perkins. Take note, you can Google it, you will see his name, John Perkins. Some of the people you have, I've made reference to it, and you can get. I made the point that mode of warfare today and in the foreseeable future is not a matter of tanks, it's not a matter of missiles, it is through the media. It is through the media manipulation. Even now, you can hear some countries are crying that there is cyber attack. Cyber attack is invisible. It is within electronic system manipulation. God help you if your system is attacked through cyber attack, they can down you in no minutes. So what I'm saying, in the foreseeable future, the attack, you may not see tanks and divisions of army, infantry fighting, but at the same time it is taking place. UN specialized agencies like World Health Organization, they were set up to help mitigate some of the excesses which may happen worldwide, which are cross-border in nature, so that countries can be released of some of the, like Ebola. Many countries are cooperating. It is a cross-border issue. But what I'm trying to say is that issues of global nature are being tackled in order to stop countries to engage in military warfare. Do we need to argue that insecurity is a hindrance to economic development? It is quite obvious. I don't think we need to argue about that, because resources which should otherwise go for development will be devoted to prosecution of the war, and it's very expensive. There is shift in security considerations. Before, people were concerned with state security of the state. But today, we are concerned with the security of the person, that's the individual. And your security is tied to many things, environment, education, or whatever. And I cite a case where they said, if under the present Human Development Index considerations or formula, if you consider America with other countries, under the former calculation, America will be number 2, Norway will be number 1. But if you apply the current criteria of Human Development Index, about 23 countries in Europe will be above America. What is it? What we are saying is that if you take the case of Nigeria, for instance, the income of the high and the low, if you say per capita of Nigeria is 200 naira, but is everybody earning 200 naira per day? It's not possible. So the differences can be there like that. By the end of last year, there are about 26 African countries which are having security problems. 6 are quite notable, and among the 6, Egypt, Libya, Mali, Nigeria, Somalia, and Sudan. I hope nobody can argue on that list. Security and welfare has been stated in our Constitution as the primary responsibility of government. But so are other countries. Everybody will want security and welfare. And that is the primary purpose of government. If you cannot guarantee those things, then you are not performing well. Over 6 decades since African countries became independent, are we having any further excuse as to why we are not developed? 60 years, more than 60 years. Before, you said we just attained independence. Now 60 years, some of us were not even born at that time, and yet we have not received any level of development. Is there any more excuses? What I said is that excuses, we are running out of excuses in lacking development. But issues of transparency in leadership and corruption remain very high on the agenda. Leadership and corruption, among all the excuses, remain very high on the agenda. Just to sum up, I would like to make a few points. Only very few countries in the African continent have gotten their electoral systems right. Very few. Therefore, to stabilize democracy as a primary condition for security and national development in a society of great diversity, such as the case in most African countries, decision makers in positions of leadership at all levels should always strive for a workable formula. Call it whatever, whether zoning or no zoning. If you are running your house, you have no constitution, but you must be fair to members of your family. That's what I said, constitution or no constitution. You have no constitution in your house, and then you have a family, and you cater for all of them fairly. That is what it should be. What must be admitted in the case of Nigeria is that whatever measures governments have so far taken to generate employment in the country requires redoubling efforts. We can argue. Government of today say they have done a lot of job creation, but you and I are the, what do you call it now, benefactors. Can we confirm? It's not possible. Many countries have set up oversight organs to ensure financial probity. In Nigeria, we have EFCC, we have Code of Conduct, and all this. They are supposed to ensure probity. But the functioning of these institutions depends on individuals. You can have the same constitution or rule being administered by different persons, but you will have different effects depending on the personality who is driving those institutions. I give you an example. We had a notable Nigerian who was accused of certain things, and he was freed, even though he had several charges against him, only for him to travel overseas, and they jailed him within minutes. And yet they are applying about the same rules. I said, and a notable legal luminary says, when politics enter the palace of justice, justice leaves by the back door. Lord Jennings, I think, is associated with this statement. When politics enter the palace of justice, justice leaves by the back door. So either you allow justice to take place according to law, or else you forget about justice. And this example I gave you of somebody who was acquitted on several counts, only to go outside and be convicted within a short time, tells the story. I said, inbuilt in the security system of most countries is machinery for early warning to foretell breakdown of law and order. In security parlance, we say apprehension of situations which are likely to give rise to breakdown of law and order. Once there is a breakdown of law and order, the worst has happened, because the security agencies are supposed to stop it. Before you have wound, you should be treated of ailment, so that you don't die and then somebody will come and prescribe a solution for you. Let me conclude, because I'm just skipping through. As I said, I will leave some gaps for my discussion. For you people, when you go and read the papers, between the lines, because it is more detailed than what I'm delivering here. It should be observed that in spite of the centrality of man in security and development consideration, conduct and performance of states, group of states and non-state actors. Non-state actors are all these ISL and something there. They don't belong to any state. It's not a state fighting another state. And yet, they are upsetting the security system in the world. A man is in a state of nature, is said to be selfish, so are states. If you say the individual in his state of nature was selfish and was the powerful, or the, what do you call it now? We call it the survival of the fittest. But the states today, Nigeria, South Africa, and whatever, count them, they are the actors in the international scene. But they are behaving very much like an individual. I told you, at the end of the day, consider every policy of any country, most of these countries, is trade and resources they are looking for. Trade and resources. If they are friendly with you, if you are poor, they may not want to be friendly with you. If you are rich, they will be friendly with you. Africa is a source of resource. So there is a new scramble for Africa. Even those who had no colony in Africa before are now scrambling to outwit one another. Unfortunately, since independence, we're not able to get over our difficulties. The year 2014, I'm going to environment now as one of the issues of weapons of mass destruction. Weapons of mass destruction manufactured by man, but there is also weapon of mass destruction by nature. Things like drought, and things like, what is that? Floods. If they come, if flood comes, it kills in plenty, and so is drought. You only need the Sahara at that time when we had drought in the African continent and see how animals are dying. So we have weapons of mass destruction manufactured by man, like bombs, but you have the one of nature. And they said last year, 2014, was about the hottest in history. So where are we going? Those who are living near Himalayan mountain, the highest mountain in the world, said in the past 10 years, they observed no snow. And that they fear that in the next 30 years, there may be no rivers in that part of the world. I said this to emphasize the aspect of environmental security, that it is not only bomb we fear, but also natural happenings, whether tsunami or whatever, which kills in hundreds. Unfortunately, many countries are only out to promote their national interests at the expense of others. Unwarranted violence inflicted against others, and even beneficial collaborative efforts among them, such as determination by certain countries to review the world economic order and create more global financial institutions. If those people who are studying economics cast your mind to what is happening now, we used to have IMF and World Bank. Some countries are complaining that it is difficult to access money for development. So some countries are now are collaborating to say, oh wait, let us set up bank for infrastructure, let us set up bank for this. And so in the no distant future, we are likely to have other international financial institutions, which will change the world economic order. We hope so, for better. Because at the moment, you want financial assistance, and they will attach strings to it and say, you must behave in this fashion, or will not give you. It is only one way. Some people want to create another opportunity. If you don't get it here, you should be able to get it here. And some countries are collaborating to break that monopoly of certain world financial institutions. We hope for the better. An international court of justice is in place. But I look at those who have been arraigned before such courts so far. You will know that it is a court meant for certain people. How many people in advanced countries have been arraigned? Are they not committing crimes? Why is it they look at some one African leader and say, this is you, they arraign him before that? But I said some countries are committing even worse crimes and they get away with it. Let me conclude that under the leadership of the United Nations, because we have at the moment no alternative, it is the United Nations which is the central body which has no money, no army, no nothing. And even the Secretary of the UN, they always prefer and get a weak person, not a strong person. Because those people who pay most for the finances of the United Nations choose who should be there. Not what 100 and something of our countries will choose. It is they who will choose at the end of the day, and the person they put there will be weak, and will be the person whom they will be able to control. Under the leadership of the United Nations, mankind may not have entirely escaped the savagery of the state of nature. However, some actions of mankind, like many nations of the Western world, have made commendable strides in leadership, security, and national development. African countries, or African leadership, can galvanize positive changes in their various nations, instead of looking up to the prejudicial leadership of the United Nations to bail them out of the current security situation and development. I'm saying that if you are looking up to the United Nations for salvation, forget it, because we are not in control. We don't pay much. Those people who pay dictate the situation. The Club of Five, United Nations, they can manipulate any resolution and say it is United Nations resolution, and they'll carry it out. If the United Nations is forthcoming, they'll deploy their military to go and extend it. This is the world we are in today. I thank you very much.
Very wonderful. Round of applause to our distinguished lecturer. And I have the honor to invite Professor Oyedele, our discussant for today's lecture, to continue with the program.
Mr. Chairman, sir, our distinguished guest speaker, distinguished members of the high table, ladies and gentlemen, especially given the fact that the guest speaker said I should fill in the gaps. I don't know what to fill in now. But I want to start by observing one or two things. The first one is to say a word about the chairman of today. Our father, a respected statesman. I just whispered to him that anytime I walk into Arewa House to do some research, I meet him there in Arewa House. I wonder what research he's doing at this time. I want to say that it has been an encouragement to us when we see people like our father here still reading and doing research. And I think it's a big challenge for us as students in ABU. We can never read enough. Please, let's work hard and read well. Our guest lecturer, I think I've sat in where he gave a lecture some time ago. The lecture was, I think, in 1998. I can't remember where you gave the lecture, Dr. Bukar. It was on the military and democracy. That was when Nigeria was preparing to go into the democratic dispensation that came in 1999. And as he was that day, I could see today again that ABU did not make a mistake to honor him with a doctorate degree. The lecture he has presented, I've read through it. The way he has compressed and logically arranged the discussion is very commendable. The way he has delivered it before us this afternoon is also commendable. I thought he would read the paper. No, he spoke to the paper. Clearly demonstrating that he is an erudite scholar because the presentation has been very, very thorough. So I want to say that the topic is very, very topical and relevant to us. And our guest speaker has done justice to it. So I don't know what I will do. I will just touch on issues here and there and run away. The first one is, I want to say that I like the way the guest speaker approached the topic. He left us in no doubt in addressing an issue that I think people normally gloss over. When we are talking about security, whose security are we talking about? And he has told us clearly that we are talking about people, not class, not state security. We are talking of security of you and me. And I think that is a very good place to start. The guest speaker, I want to start referring to him as Mr. Security. And I think what he has given us today is similar to what a colleague of his, who was also in government in the United States of America, did. And that's somebody that is familiar to all of us, Robert McNamara. He served in government, and when he left, he wrote a book that addressed these similar issues of security and so on. And the position he took is just exactly like that of Dr. Bukar. And I just want to quote him directly. He was talking about security, and this is what McNamara said. McNamara says, that security means development. And I think that's what Dr. Bukar told us. Without security, there cannot be development. And we agree with him. And without development, there can be no security. So the two are together. If you don't have security, without security, no development. If there's no development, there's no security. I think that's the summary of the presentation to us today. But McNamara didn't stop there. He added, development means economic, social, and political progress. It means a reasonable standard of living. And that's what Dr. Bukar told us. Can we say that we're experiencing good living standard in Nigeria? So, what this lecture is telling us is that security is a sine qua non to development. No security, no development. And Dr. Bukar went on to say that over the years, issues of national security have been attached to the military, but that has not helped to give us security in the world. And he is saying there must be a balance between investment in military hardware and so on, as well as investment in the person, in the people that you want to secure. And so there must be a good balance so that you will be dealing with the issue of the survival of the individual that you want to secure. If he is hungry, if he is disease-laden, and so on and so forth, what security are you providing for him? That is the argument of our guest speaker. I think I like the dimension that the guest speaker gave us. He was historical about his analysis. And I want to say that whatever discipline that we're dealing with, we cannot run away from history. I think one of the problems Nigeria is facing today is our attitude to our history. Yes. And I think the earlier we turn back, the better it will be for us. The guest speaker took time to look at the hegemonic dimension of the issues surrounding security in the world system. And I like that approach that he gave the analysis. And he ended his lecture by drawing our attention that that hegemonic system, which is under the United Nations, is having a lot of problems. And the earlier we try to do something about it, the better. Because the United Nations has arrogated itself since 1945 with the appellate of the policeman of the world. And it has its own problems. He had told us it is controlled by 5 countries, and they do what they like using the United Nations and its agencies. These are well articulated in the paper. And I think he's making the suggestion that there is need for the reform of the United Nations, especially the Security Council. I think we agree with him. He looked at a number of issues that are relevant in order to ensure security nationally and in the world system. One of the things that Dr. Bukar brought out very clearly is the fact that if you are talking of national security, you must be very concerned that nationally your system is inclusive. I think part of the problem that Nigeria is facing today is that we are running a system that is not inclusive. And that is creating security problems for us. He has tied this with the issue of social justice and probity. He talked about corruption and so on and so forth. We cannot agree less with our guest speaker. In fact, he made the quotation that when something comes to the palace, politics, when politics comes to the palace, justice sneak away through the back door. I want to agree with that in the line with his analysis by quoting another great scholar, Sheikh Usman in his book, Bayan Wujab al-Hijra. And he made an outstanding statement that is the bottom line of all that we're discussing. He said, a kingdom can endure with unbelief, but it cannot endure with injustice. Never. If we run a system of injustice, we will run into problem. And I think central to our problem in Nigeria is injustice. I want to move quickly to relate to an issue that Dr. Bukar mentioned, but I think he left us to reach our own conclusions. I don't know what conclusions you will reach. He says, when we are talking about security concerns, there are the internal dimension and there are the external dimension. He says he doesn't know what your position will be, which is more important, which affects which most. I strongly believe that no matter how great external security intervention is, if the internal is strong, there's very little that the external can do. I'm saying this because I know the experience that Cuba has gone through. It is surrounded by enemy nations. And in spite of everything, it has survived as a nation. In fact, finally, America went and negotiated dialogue and peace with them. Internally, they are strong. So, it relates to the issue of threats